Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Waterloo Special Council meeting, Monday, November 15th, 2021 at approximately 6:30 p.m. We will begin this council meeting with a roll call, beginning with Ward 2, please.
Good evening. Councillor Bodley present.
Councillor Veith present.
Councillor Freeman present.
Councillor Henry present.
Councillor Bonagor present.
And I'm the mayor, and I'm here today too. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are broadcasting from today, and many of us are gathering on, is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. We now take a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Moving on to item 4, I'd now like to ask for a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof from council, please. Hearing none, we move on to item 5, which is the approval of minutes. There's one set of minutes here from the October 18th special council meeting. I'd ask Ward 2, Ward 3 to consider moving approval of the minutes, please.
Councillor Bodley will move the minutes and vote in favor.
Councillor Veith, I second the motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
The mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. The minutes. Moving on to staff reports. Item 6A, Waterloo City Centre, or City Hall, offer to lease Unit 140, Cecilia Johnston. A report prepared for us by Liz Williams, and Liz is on the line for any questions, but I think Liz would also like to speak to a addendum to the motion at hand. Liz, are you there?
Yes. Yes. There is a small change in recommendation 3. This is due to the longer turnaround time that the engineering firm, the determinant is asking more time to perform the mechanical assessment, which is required by the city based on the offer. Therefore, we revise the recommendation 3 to give the tenant the option to extend the condition.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just repeat for everyone else that recommendation number 3 is that subject to the tenant confirming they have waived all conditions as set out in the offered lease, mayor and clerk shall be authorized to sign the lease agreement and any other necessary documents. I'll just look to see if there's any council members who have any hands up, and if not, I might go to Ward 7. This is in beautiful uptown Waterloo to consider moving this along. And I do not see any hands up. I'll look to Ward 7, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jaworski. This through you. I'd like to make them move the recommendation as the revised recommendation as printed before us on the amended agenda here. And I will vote in favour, and I look forward to deliciousness in the city centre. Cecilia Johnson is a local baker, just to help that make sense.
Councillor Bodley, I'll second the motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
The mayor's in favor too, but it's sad to think that City Hall isn't filled with deliciousness at this time, but we do look forward to our new tenant bringing some along. Moving on, thank you, Liz. Moving along to item 6B. It's the 2022 interim tax levy. A report prepared for us by Mary Zubert. Just looking for council for any questions for Mary. A routine item, I might look to Councillor Henry, Finance Chair, if you have any comments on this, but fairly routine. I don't see any hands, Councillor Henry, so maybe you might move this one along for us.
Sure, I'll move the recommendation before us and vote in favor.
Councillor Bonagor, I second the motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Counselor Freeman in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you to the finance team for the work on funding us for 2022. Moving along to item 7, which is the public meeting session, a section of our meeting. And we begin a formal public meeting. So let me just pull out the special wording here. And if you would like to speak at this public planning session, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. That's 519-747-8705 to be added to the list of delegates for the meeting beginning right now. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendment Z2109 to remove the holding symbol from Hemlock Street, addresses 290, 292, 294, 296, 298 at what's called 298 Hemlock Inc. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Rita Zilak, at 519-747-8650 or at rita.zilak at waterloo.ca. That's RITA.SZILOCK at waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of this meeting and the dates notice was given? And one moment while I turn down the volume in here.
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on October 21st, 2021, and mailed or emailed on October 19th, 2021 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and to public agencies. No informal public meeting was held. Thanks, Mayor.
The planner, Rita, will now give a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Good evening. Good evening, members of council, members of the public, and members of staff. Although I didn't prepare a formal presentation for you this evening, I can certainly give a very, very brief overview of the application. The applicant's proposal is to build a 6-story multi-residential building containing 92 one-bedroom units and 24 parking spaces at 290, 292, 294, 296, and 298 Hemlock Street in Northdale. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment application Z2109 in front of council this evening is to lift the holding provisions from the subject lands and to allow the detailed design phase of the development to be finalized and for development to proceed. Staff are in support of the removal of the holding symbol from the subject lands, as the applicant has satisfied all the requirements associated with the removal of the holding symbol. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Rita, for the concise overview. And I'll just note to councillors that there is one delegate on this speaking on behalf of the proponent, I'm guessing, but it looks like it. Do I have any questions for Rita at this time? Please go ahead, Councillor Veith.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. And I just a quick question. These are all one-bedroom units, and are they all the same size of unit? And are there dens? Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Veith. We were not given floor plans with the H removal application. Floor plans would have been received with the site plan application. They do seem to be the same size. I don't have the exact sizes, but I do see on the site plan, like general size for the units, they do seem to be the same size. I hope that helps. Maybe the applicant can answer in more detail.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. And Rita, I see no further questions for you. If anyone would like to speak at this meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. I will now call upon the registered delegate to speak. It's Alicia Monteith, Manager of Planning and Strategic Initiatives, Preca Global Enterprises. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Good evening, council members, staff, and members of the public. As Mayor Jaworski stated, my name is Alicia Monteith, and I'm here this evening on behalf of 298 Hemlock Street in support of the lifting of holding bylaw before you. I have reviewed the city's staff report and support the recommendation for approval this evening. I don't have anything specific or additional to add at this time, but I am available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. I will now look to anyone who has further questions for this delegate. And at this point in time, I don't see any questions for you, Alicia. So thank you very much for your delegation tonight. One moment, please, while I check with the clerk's office to see if there's been any phones ringing in the clerk's office in the past few minutes. As the deputy clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. If anyone would like to receive further notice of this, you can reach our planner, Rita, at 519-747-8650. I'll now look to the ward councillor to offer some considerations.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll read the Bill 73 wording. Whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved, 1, that council approves staff report IPPW 2021-064, 2, that council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z-21-09, 298 Hemlock Inc. for 290, 292, 294, 296, 298 Hemlock Street, in accordance with Section 6 of Staff Report IPPW 2021-064. And having moved that, I'd be happy to vote in favor of that as well.
This is Councillor Bonagor. I'm happy to second and will also vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Rita, for shepherding this through to council.
Thank you. Good evening.
Moving along, item 7B. Hold on, let me pull up my paperwork here. Again, if you'd like to speak at this public planning meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. This is a formal public meeting to consider zone change application Z1819 for 195-5207 Ontario Inc. and 195-5485 Ontario Inc. for 36 and 42 Herb Street East and 39 DuPont Street East. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Laura Dewar, at 519-747-8108, or at laura.dewar@waterloo.ca, and that's spelled LAURA.DEWAR@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of this meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on October 21st, 2021, and mailed or emailed on October 19th, 2021 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, and to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on January the 14th, 2019, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you very much, Natalia. The planner, Laura Dewar, will now give a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Laura.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, councilors, and others joining remotely. I do have a presentation. There it is. So as has already been mentioned, this is the formal public meeting for zone change application Z 18-19, an application advanced by the Planning Partnership on behalf of the landowners for 36 and 42 Herb Street East and 39 DuPont Street East. Next slide, please. So the subject site consists of 3 separate parcels, you can see here, which are intended to be consolidated. The site has frontage on Herb Street, Pepler Street, and DuPont Street. Herb Street is an arterial regional road, and Pepler and DuPont are local city streets. Next slide, please. The adjacent properties to the north, I can't point to them, but you can see there are some single residential homes. Some have been duplexed. Some of them have been converted to small commercial uses, art studios. There's a small bakery just adjacent to this site along Pepler Street. And there's also an office building just next to the properties on DuPont Street to the west. Directly east of the site is Laurel Street, which connects into Pepler. You can see we have the Laurel Trail. I've shown it with the dashed green line. There's also a small church and a small commercial building just to the east of the site. To the south are various office buildings and the extension of the Laurel Trail. We have the Spur Line Crossing Plaza and the city's public parking station lot as well. To the west is vacant land used currently as a parking lot, and also is Gina's Salon, which faces onto Regina Street. And those properties have actually been consolidated under the same ownership. They're also just to the north in the corner to round out the block. We have the commercial property there. It's mixed use, and you might know Seven Shores Cafe is in that building. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of the DuPont Street frontage. You can see 39 DuPont Street with the, which is currently a 4-bedroom historic house. It is occupied as a house currently, and you can see to the rear of 36 Herb Street East, which is on the right side of the frontage here, and that's a through lot out to Herb Street. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of the Herb Street frontage. You can see 36 Herb Street East is just there on the left with the red brick building. It was formerly Buck Animal Hospital. And then we have 42 Herb Street East, the largest of the 3 properties, which is the former liquor store building, now contains various commercial and office tenants. So both of these buildings would be demolished to make way for the proposed development of the lands. Next slide, please. The development concept for the site has evolved based on a number of factors and feedback from staff and agencies. But this here is where we have arrived. So this is a rendering of the proposed development of the lands. We're looking north at the intersection of Herb and Pepler Street here. It's a mixed-use building, 22 stories in height. It has ground floor commercial space fronting Herb and Pepler. Stories 2 to 4 would contain structured parking, and then stories 5 to 22 would contain about 234 dwelling units, and there are no stories proposed below grade. Next slide, please. So this is a conceptual site plan of the proposed development. Driveway access is proposed from Herb Street and DuPont Street. The Heritage House is to be retained in its original condition, and there would be a small communal open space behind the Heritage House between the new building and the Heritage House. And the 3 parcels, as I said, would be consolidated. Next slide, please. So the site is designated in the official plan as Uptown Commercial Core and Primary Node. You can see the small red dot on this map shows the location of the site. It's also within the Laurel Trail Special Policy Area, so this means a small sliver of the site along Pepler Street is within the floodway, and you cannot do anything in the floodway. You cannot, you can't really alter the site, that portion of the site at all. The remainder of the site is within the flood fringe, where development is permitted, subject to meeting certain technical requirements like flood proofing and providing safe access. Next slide, please. So you can see here in the official plan, the northern portion of 36 Herb Street and all of 39 DuPont Street are designated for development that's medium density and up to 20 meters in height. And the southern portion is designated for development that's high density, up to 81 meters in height. So this is called split designation with respect to permitted height and density. The official plan allows what we refer to as density transferring. So this is where you can shift some of the density from one designation to the other, provided that the overall height limits are not exceeded and the lands must be consolidated. Next slide, please. This particular zone change application is referred to as a legacy application, which means that it was submitted to the city prior to the enactment of our new zoning bylaw, which came into effect in 2018. So at the time the application was submitted, there were 3 zones that applied to the lands. We have C625, C7-4, and GR4, where the Heritage House is. Next slide, please. So when the new bylaw was enacted, it applied the zone change application zone category to the subject lands, which means the former zoning continues to apply until a new zoning category and framework is applied to the lands. It's also worth noting that the floodplain prefix applies to all the lands, and the surrounding lands you can see on this image are U120 to the north. We have U160 to the directly to the west, and then we have U181 on the south side of Herb Street. And then open space 3 zone is sort of the Laurel, the creek. The new 2018 zoning bylaw introduced new zoning regulations that previously did not exist for towers and podiums, visitor parking, and wider parking spaces next to columns and walls. Next slide, please. So the application itself has evolved. The original request was to apply the old C625 zone to all of the lands. But after consulting with staff, the applicant has changed the request to apply the new zones in a split zoning fashion that aligns with the official plan. So the north portion would be Uptown Commercial Core 20, and the southern portion would be Uptown Commercial Core 81. To accommodate the specific development proposal, they're also requesting some site-specific regulations related to reducing the street line setback along Herb and Pepler, also the rear yard setback, tower separation to the west lot line, tower step back requirement, and the commercial and visitor parking rates and dimensions, and an increase in the podium height. Next slide, please. So to evaluate the zoning amendment request and the overall development proposal, staff considered the applicable provincial, regional, and city policy frameworks. We also were looking at, this is a legacy application, so balancing the existing permission with the new bylaw regulations. We looked at surrounding conditions, heritage impacts, architecture and design, safety of future residents, being that this is in a flood fringe. We looked at shadow impacts, public feedback, traffic circulation, servicing capacity, source water protection. We looked at what possible physical impediments there might be in the way of development on or around the site. We looked at road widenings, and we looked at other future approvals that might be required for implementing the proposed development. And I discussed these considerations further in my staff report. Next slide, please. So based on our review of the application, staff were recommending that council approve the split zoning of the lands as U120 and U181, aligning the boundaries of the zones with the height and density designations in the official plan. We are also recommending approval of site-specific regulations for podium height, street line and rear yard setbacks, and step backs between stories. We are recommending a tower separation of 10 meters to the westerly lot line. We're recommending a reduced standard parking space dimension, recognizing this is a legacy application, reduced commercial and visitor parking rates. We are proposing that the height be capped at 70 meters and 22 stories, just to give council and the public some certainty about what they might see here, that it generally looks like the proposed development as we are seeing through this application. They would legalize the location of the heritage house and apply a holding symbol to the lands. Next slide, please. So staff are recommending that there's a number of items that have to be satisfied prior to lifting the holding, passing a bylaw to lift the holding from the site, and prior to development proceeding to building permit issuance. So I've listed the items here. These are items that have not been completed yet. In some cases, they are best completed concurrently with a detailed site plan approval process. And in some cases, we have limited authority to require some of these items after the zoning's in place. So the holding really gives us that authority. Next slide, please. Lastly, staff are recommending council endorse a number of site plan and urban design objectives, and I've just listed them here. Architectural screening of the parking structure, installing a 4-meter wide multi-use pathway along Pepler Street adjacent to the site, accommodating trees along Herb Street, protecting nearby trees, completing a wind study, incorporating sustainable design elements. So these would be completed or implemented through the site plan approval process. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Very extensive. I will now just pause to see if any hands go up for questions of staff. I will note that we do have a couple of delegates here. Please go ahead, Ward Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you, Laura, for all of the information and for the exhaustive staff report that was made available to us. I know before I was a councillor, when I would sit in on these meetings, sometimes it felt like there was a lot of information that was under the surface. So I'm just going to ask a few questions of you now to kind of answer some questions of my own, but also to help the public sort of understand how we've come to this place as well. So first of all, this proposal that's before us at the moment, it's the tower itself is a bit lower than the original proposal, but the podium is a bit higher than the original proposal. So overall, does staff consider that this is consistent with the official plan and our intensification plans and consistent with the surrounding zoning around these lots?
Mm-hmm. Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the official plan speaks really just to overall building height and general adherence to the urban design manual. It doesn't speak to podiums and towers specifically as the ultimate built form preference. for tall buildings. That was really something that was introduced through the new 2018 zoning bylaw. And I think potentially we might see through the update to the official plan some policies that are more reflective of that new zoning bylaw, sort of tower and podium built form direction. I think so just to answer your question, yes, we do think that the built form and the zoning framework as requested and recommended for approval by staff is consistent with the official plan. I think this request to increase the podium height still achieves the desired built form, being a podium and a tower. And it's also fair as a legacy application, which means the current site doesn't have any podium requirements. So we're still sort of moving this applicant towards introducing a zoning framework that's consistent with the new framework and also aligns with the official plan.
Okay, thank you. That helps. So this area, anyone who's spent time in it will know that at peak traffic times, it gets a little congested. Are there plans or provisions to kind of mitigate any possible impact on local streets from this development, or is that something that would come forward through the holding symbols?
Through your Mayor Jaworski, the traffic study that was presented with the application didn't recommend any off-site improvements or mitigation measures. It was vetted through the Transportation Services Group. They didn't have concerns with those recommendations. And I would say that at this time, for that reason, there aren't any off-site mitigation measures. We are taking road widenings, and we're doing that because ultimately the official plan identifies Kepler and DuPont as ultimately having a wider width. So that's really the only, I would say, contribution to potentially improving the streets adjacent to the site is just road widenings at this point.
Okay, and I mean, it's worth noting that it's so close to transit and trails as well. So I was really just bringing that forward because some residents had asked. One key thing, is there a drop-off area designated within the parking zone? This is particularly given that there's potential for childcare or kind of aged living in this building, and those locations and those uses tend to come with a lot of pickup drop-off traffic.
So through you, Mayor Jaworski, there's an area, I would say, right under the building when you come in off Herb Street, and that would be the logical spot that people would pause and drop off people and pick people up. It's not a designated like slip-off area, at least in the current design. And it's not a zoning requirement. Actually, in terms of loading spaces, this part of the core is exempt from providing a loading space. But through site plan, we can certainly look at those types of operational requirements and I think work to provide a designated sort of spot that people can be safely dropped off and picked up. So that's a takeaway for the site plan application.
That sounds great. Yeah, particularly if there's going to be childcare. I think lots of parents of young children would appreciate that being a point of consideration. Now, looking at the building itself with the proximity to the rear lot lines and the massing of the building on the western end, just casting our kind of minds forward to other potential development in the area, does this proposal preclude any possible infill development on neighboring properties in the future, or could these things still move forward well in the future?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, no, it won't preclude or infringe on any development potential on adjacent properties. The step back requirement is not a requirement from the rear of the building, only from facades facing the street. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, yes, thank you. I only have a couple more, sorry. They're pretty short as well. Looking at outdoor space in your presentation, you made mention of a small communal open space behind the Heritage House. I'm just wondering if we could get some idea of what kind, and I plan to ask this of the developer too, so if you can't answer this specifically, that's fine. But what kind of outdoor amenity space is looking to be provided, and is it likely to be configured to meet the needs of pets as well as human residents?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, there is a requirement in the zoning bylaw to provide at-grade communal outdoor space, and it has to be a certain size. It's based on the size of the development, and that is being shown generally in the concept plan that's been presented. It's it's large enough that it would be it could accommodate trees and some seating and some grass space, which is nice for pets. But I would say the details of that space are to be worked out through the site plan process. I think so that's really as much as we know about that space so far. There's some terrace spaces as well, and I expect those could be designed with pets in mind.
Okay, no, that's great. I'll just flag that for staff then. So when that's something that is coming up as an issue across Ward 7 is provision for pets, and I think any capacity that can be made within the developments themselves to meet the needs of their furry four-legged residents is appreciated, not just by the residents of the buildings, but residents of the neighborhoods who share the trails and the neighborhood's streets. Thank you, Mayor. That was all of my questions, and I thank you for your patience in letting me get through them all.
Quite good. Glad we had those questions and responses from Laura. There's lots going on this property, and always lots going on in this ward. So thank you very much for that. I do see Council Bodley is next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm hoping that that maybe you can speak a little bit, and perhaps the delegate will speak to this later as well too. But if you could speak a little bit to the Heritage House, it is going to be preserved. Can you speak to sort of what the next steps are in order to ensure that it is preserved for a long time going forward, as opposed to the developer letting it perhaps fall into a state of disrepair? What tools do we have for that at this stage?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, staff will be bringing forward a report to council. So basically, sorry, just to go back, there was a heritage impact study that was completed as part of this zone change application. It did note that the building had architectural significance and is worth preserving in the long term, which is also the developer's intent, I will add. So staff is going to be bringing forward as a next step a staff report, which is going to recommend designation of that existing structure under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And this is also something that has been included in the list of items under the holding. So the holding basically states that council needs to make a decision on this matter as a matter of clearing that particular condition. So council may decide they are in agreement and support that, in which case then there is a process for moving forward with the designation. I can't speak to that in any great detail. It's more of a question, I think, for the city's heritage planner. But once council makes a decision that they do want it designated, then I believe it moves forward to being designated and protected from any future demolition or modifications. Alternatively, council could decide they don't want to designate it. They just want to leave it basically the way it is, which is sort of non-designated and listed in the Heritage Register, which is a possibility as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. I look forward to seeing that report when it does come to council. And my last question is about the Laurel Trail there. Obviously, it's a key active transportation corridor for the city, residents across the city. Are there going to be, from a construction perspective, any impacts to the Laurel Trail that are foreseen, or will it be sort of accessible throughout the entirety of the construction? And once the building is completed, would you say that there would be any sort of improvements to how sort of active transportation users are utilizing the trail at this sort of intersection here, or is it going to be sort of as is?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, unfortunately I don't have I'm not really involved in what you're just sort of describing as the construction staging plan and where they would gain access during construction. I can't speak to that. I think that the city would, basically be making a decision about where is it least disruptive, where does it make the most sense from a, looking at all aspects, not just the trail, but the roads and people using sidewalks and such, and make a decision about where construction vehicles should be gaining access to the site. I also would like it to be that it's not disruptive of that trail, being how well used it is. And but I can't speak to exactly where the construction access to the site would be, or whether it will or will not impact the sort of the trail usage. I'd like to think that it won't impact the trail usage. And I'm not sure if someone else can speak further to that for you. I can tell you that in terms of improving the trail, the city's transportation master plan did identify a gap in the Laurel Trail network, being that little section along Pepler Street in adjacent to this site, which does have a sort of multi-use pathway today, but I think it'll be improved. Well, it will be improved as a requirement of site plan approval. They'll need to show full 4-meter wide multi-use pathway adjacent to the Pepler Street frontage, and that really will form part of that part of the Laurel Trail.
That's awesome. Thank you. I, like you, hope that it's not going to have any impact on the trail users. If anybody else does want to speak to that, that would be great. But if not, I'll leave that there. Thank you for the answers. That's it from me, Mayor Jaworski.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Bodley. And Laura, I see no further questions for you. And so what we're going to do is move along to delegations, of which we have 2. First up is Bruce Hall, partner in the planning partnership. And Bruce, you have up to 10 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council, staff, and the public. Really appreciate this opportunity to speak to this project tonight. We've been at it for a very long time. We've worked really hard with your staff in a very collaborative way, and moved it along to a point where I think everybody is in agreement with the massing and design, and we can move forward on the zoning on that basis. And then the next step is to move to site plan approval, which, as Laura said, will deal with a lot of the more detailed issues. Next slide, please. So Laura's highlighted where it is, and these are the 3 properties, and I won't elaborate any more, but to say that there's a very significant frontage along Herb Street here, which is not really very attractively activated right now, and that's one of the big sort of milestones of this project, will be to activate Herb Street East frontage in accordance with the planned function and urban design direction for a lot of downtown. Next slide, please. And this site is very strategically located, has been indicated within the Waterloo Urban Growth Center and the MTSA. And it represents an important site there because it's not really achieving its planned function right now in an area that's really expected to receive the greatest levels of intensification within this area. It has significant services, amenities, and civic functions. And the redevelopment of this site would allow those to be leveraged and capitalized on, including transit. Next slide, please. And this is just showing, where the site is located and a number of, amenities that are already there that can be utilized in terms of the shops at Waterloo Town Square, the civic functions, the shops and restaurants on King Street, Waterloo Park, and of course the transit infrastructure. Next slide, please. And as one of the councillors mentioned, taking a look at the density here and traffic and parking is very important to consider how strategically located this site is within the MTSA and the Urban Growth Center, and the ability to leverage those significant investments that both the region and the city have made, as well as to capitalize on some of the other amenities like the trail connections, et cetera. And this is really one of the driving forces behind provincial policy today. Next slide, please. And this is just talking about this extensive local open space network. We were just talking about, the Laurel Trail, and this site is so ideally located within that network and able to integrate into it, which is a really important connector between the institutions and Waterloo Park and downtown, uptown Waterloo and Moses Springer. And I will talk a little bit more about how that will be enhanced. Next slide, please. And this is just really, an indication of how these sites are really underutilized and not achieving their planned function. It's a very key site for downtown Waterloo in achieving the goals and objectives of the official plan, provincial policy, and regional and local policy, while providing a site that has not developed to this point because it had this safe access to deal with. There was other developers that got into it and didn't follow through. It was a very, complicated matter to deal with. And we finally found a way with the cooperation of the Conservation Authority, our engineers and planning staff to address it. And this allows this site really to be leveraged, to create new housing, to create new employment, jobs, enhance the public realm, and protect heritage. Next slide, please. This is the policy framework. Laura's done a very thorough job of covering it off, and I'm not going to belabor it except to say that we agree with the recommendations of the report. We believe it conforms to and implements the OP around the Urban Growth Center, the heightened density, and where it needs refinements to the zoning bylaw is really about this being caught between two different versions, dealing with the site specifics of this site and the safe access and other matters. Next slide, please. As Laura said, we went through a number of iterations to get to the point where we see eye to eye in terms of the built form and the density and the massing, and we believe that that's the best deployment of that. We started off with a proposal, as Laura said, which was higher, and the councillor asked the question about the podium got bigger. That was because we were asked initially to bring the height of the building down to meet the new zoning bylaw requirement. Then the building, in order to optimize the density, got pushed out and the podium got bigger. Staff came back and said, well, we agree with a slightly bigger podium, but we want a slender tower. We want to achieve the urban design direction of the OP and the city's urban design guidelines. And so this is the next slide, please, where we have arrived at. In the end, it produces quite a refined massing compared to where we started that was acceptable to staff. The height, is 22 stories. There's a number of residential units, quite a significant amount of commercial at grade, which activates, as I said, that whole frontage along Herb Street, which we think is really, really important. It's a bit of a quiet zone right now. A lot of bicycle parking, vehicle parking, which meets the residential requirement, but we've asked for a variance from the parking for visitor and commercial, and I can get into that in a bit more, a minor amount. About 8,500 square feet of indoor amenity. If you look at that image and you see at the top of the podium, there's a tree. That whole level inside is indoor amenity. This is quite a significant amount for a building even of this size, plus all the space outside around that, another 6,000 odd square feet, plus the space that Laura spoke of at grade. Next slide, please. We believe that the way that this density has ultimately been deployed is appropriate. It provides for a transition down and away from higher heights and higher densities towards King Street, and drops heights as you get down towards Pepler and away from the urban growth center. No structure is located on the DuPont properties. That was very specific from the beginning. We kind of want to maintain that character as much as possible. The heritage structure, as Laura said, will remain in place. We have no problems with putting a heritage easement on it. That maintains that sort of character of that DuPont Street frontage. It's going to be residentially used. It's currently rental. It's providing rental accommodation. Our client does not want to change that. And this is notwithstanding that there is entitlement for much higher buildings along the DuPont Street frontage up to 6 stories in height. Next slide, please. We really looked at trying to create a very pedestrian scaled streetscape and podium. There's a lot of glazing at grade. There's a lot of landscaping. Some of the changes in grade are to do with the safe access, and safety is paramount. So we have to formulate it that way. There's going to be a lot of planting. It'll create a lot of activity. There's no residential uses at grade. All these spaces will be highly activated. Next slide, please. We looked at the area and trying to figure out how to deal with having an above grade garage. We've seen great examples in other jurisdictions, and we've seen not so great examples. This is going to be 100% wrapped around. You will not see bumpers and cars parked up around the edge. We took our kind of cues from a lot of the surrounding loft kind of industrial buildings. We looked at them. We looked at the rhythm and the cadence, and that was an influence on the podium design. Next slide, please. And you can see how this kind of very similar kind of approach was undertaken. Some of the same materials, masonry materials, some of the same rhythms, and really just kind of trying to up the ante on what that garage will look like. It will not look like a typical parking garage. Next slide, please. We've developed a fairly vibrant public realm approach, made a lot of refinements to it. We used to have structure and different things in the rear yard. All that has been pulled out. It's landscaped. You can walk literally right around this building. You can, if you're a resident, you can go to every street. When we made refinements to the parking, we took away the parking access from Pepler. So it is now
Yeah, Councillor Bonagor, it's not just yours. I'm just waiting. So can somebody type in the chat line if they can hear me? Or let me know if they can hear me? Okay, good. So I think we've lost the delegate, Bruce.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. So
I think my screen. I think my screen muted itself.
Yeah. Okay. So you were talking about the parking. You're addressing this slide that's up currently, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm almost finished. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much you missed, but really the public realm approach is to have a building with public access 360 degrees around the building. You can get into the site from every street. You can walk, you can drive, you can walk around the building. There's landscaping at the back. When we changed the access for the parking, removed it from Pepler, you can now ride your bike up that sidewalk along the back. And the bike parking is at the back, it's visible. And we know that when that happens, it's likely to get used in a better way. Next slide, please. There was some questions around the Laurel Creek Trail and how that would get treated. There's quite a wide boulevard here and quite a wide setback. Our client sees this as a real chance to really elevate the quality of the outdoor space around this building and really integrate the Laurel Trail as part of this development. Right now, conceptually, they're looking at kind of creating a sort of a theme around water and the trail and using materials and architecture which speaks to that. The landscaping, the same thing, and really providing an extension of the building and the landscape into the Laurel Trail and vice versa to get people to use it. It's a great place for people on a bike ride to stop and have a rest. Hopefully there's a restaurant or an ice cream shop here. That kind of interaction is what we're looking for. Last slide, please. So just to sum up, this has been a very successful collaborative process with the city and staff to arrive at an acceptable built form massing. We believe it really leverages this site in a complete community with great access to transit and services. It activates the public realm and the existing open space network. It's got a mix of uses and unit types, which supports the Uptown Waterloo intensification job creation objectives. It preserves heritage resources. It establishes safe access to the site for the public as well as the residents and their parking. And in the end, it represents good planning, urban design, and landscape architecture approach and practice. I am happy to answer any questions. I also took a note of some of the questions that the councillors had. If they want me to go through them, I can do those as well, or they can simply repeat them to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bruce. The renderings were very helpful for me. We'll see if council wants to reiterate those questions or review other things. And first up is Ward Councillor Bonagor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you, Bruce, for all of that information. I think it's really great when we get to finally see where the discussions have come to. I mean, as you pointed out, this is a superbly walkable and bikeable location. You did mention bike parking. I'm just wondering how much of that bike parking is planned to be kind of indoor or secure parking?
I do not have the exact numbers in front of me, but a very large proportion of the resident bike parking is secure indoor parking accessed from that that walkway coming in off of Pepler. And I don't have the underground plans in front of me. Let me, if we want to carry on, I'll try to get that answer for you before we finish.
Okay, that already sounds really good. If I can pass on some feedback from other uptown apartment residents, it's please provide as much bicycle parking as physically possible. It's something I like to urge everyone, just given some feedback I've had. And this is getting back to the questions that I had asked staff earlier. Just given that request for lower parking rates on some of the parking elements, I'm just wondering if you could lead us through your thoughts or considerations when it comes to kind of drop off, pick up, or like delivery areas for those kind of short stops. And this is particularly given that, childcare and aged care are listed as possible uses for some of the building.
Sure. I think Laura started off in the right direction. There's that sort of interior connection between DuPont and Herb Street, which goes through the site and then underneath the building. And, for something like, you're dropping off your elderly mother or father, that's a perfect opportunity for it because it's a safe kind of weather protected area. If there was a daycare, I think if it was done in a very kind of, structured way, my kids went to a Montessori school. we were in a neighborhood, they tried to be good neighbors. So they would have staff standing outside, and you would pull up and they'd open the door and your kids were gone lickety split. And, you know, I think if you had it that way, then you could probably make it work quite effectively. Just to the point that Laura indicated around loading, we do have an interior loading space in that area. And that's the intent to, you know, so that it can be a dedicated loading space and it doesn't have to happen off of, you know, Herb Street or Pepler. You don't want trucks standing there, you know, idling or blocking traffic. So that is, as Laura said, we have to go through site plan approval. That'll get refined as we go through that, but there is an indication on the site plan at ground level that there is a loading area allocated.
Okay, that's great. Now you mentioned a mix of unit types. I was wondering if you could lead us through what kind of mix is envisioned for the development.
Right now, because the Waterloo official plan and the zoning bylaw is very specific around not only density around units and units as well as bedrooms. We have a mix of approximately 17 or 18% 2 bedrooms, and the rest are 1 bedrooms. And the 1 bedrooms are a mix of, I'll call them a range of larger, medium and large and small 1 bedrooms, and some are 1 bedrooms plus den. And that sort of mix, you know, our client had wanted to provide a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, but a lot of it also gets dictated by that requirement around a maximum density, a number of bedrooms by density. But, you know, something in the order of 15 to 20% of 2 bedrooms is a healthy mix.
If I can just, I understand what you're saying there, but you know what we're hearing from the community is basically a dire need for some larger apartments. That seems to be, we seem to be flooded with 1 bedroom apartments, or you know, one plus dens, some 2s. What I'm hearing from the community is people needing maybe a 2 plus a den, maybe even a 3 bedroom. We're looking at people who live in the core who want to downsize, young families who can't afford houses. So there's definitely, from what I'm hearing from my residents, there is a need. I'm just going to plant that with you and hope that maybe as you go through the site plan, that you know, we may be able to shake something a little loose, because the only thing I'm hearing is a desperate need for larger accommodation. I don't expect an answer on that from you right now, but if I can park that thought with you as you go through site plan, it's definitely something I'm hearing loud and clear, and I'm just bringing it forward to every developer who comes before us, to hope that you meet us to help kind of meet that need.
Understood.
Just a couple of more points I'm hoping you can give us some information
No problem.
on. And that's with you mentioned, I'm not sure if I understood this correctly, with the amenity space. So you've got the top of the podium is set aside. Are you saying that entire interior floor as well is planned to be amenity space, or did I misunderstand?
No, you didn't. I'm just looking for the plan. So that level, which is level 8, and if you remember back when I pointed you to, it's the first level where the podium turns into the tower. So the top of the podium, which is the top of floor 7 at level 8, that whole floor plate is allocated as indoor amenity, and it's 793 square meters, which is about 8,500 square feet. And there's no specific design or programming at this point in time, but it's a lot of space. and it provides a lot of opportunities to provide a whole range of different types of demised spaces for a broad range of activities. And then the space outdoors, which is connected to it, is all common outdoor amenity space. There's a small terrace on the west side, and then there's a much larger, it's the whole roof of the podium on the east side. And that's 516 square meters, about 5,000 or 6,000 square feet of outdoor amenity. Again, it's not designed or programmed at this point in time, but again, it's a huge amount of space with a lot of flexibility. And I think there's some potential for looking at a green roof for part of it, which would be appropriate.
Okay, that's really interesting. I appreciate you going into that detail as much as is available now. And if I can again just bring something forward that I've been hearing from residents, and that's, you know, if you are looking to have some kind of terracing area, as well as the green space, that small area behind the heritage house. One thing I hear from residents is it's really deeply appreciated when developers provide some supports for pet owners and for the pets as well as the residents. I mean, and again, I kind of leave that with you for consideration, but it sounds like you're going to have a fair bit of space to play with when you're coming up with ways to meet resident needs.
Yeah, certainly the need to accommodate pet owners is becoming more and more prevalent when people are living in higher density environments, and everybody loves pets and has pets. And we're also the landscape architects on the project, and we're seeing more and more of those types of things, both at grade and above grade. Weather protected spaces, dog washing stations. It's meeting the needs of pet owners and other residents, like you say, so that there's not an imposition upon them. And it's also, quite frankly, it's good marketing for people that want to be in that kind of environment.
Certainly. And that's thank you so much for all of that. I think the one other thing that I want to really raise is like when you're looking at amenities as well to I can imagine young families being quite interested in this location. So, amenities that are family friendly would, again, I'm sure be very much appreciated. But thank you, Mayor. That was all from me. Thanks.
Thank you.
No, excellent. This helps build the understanding of the concept that's being proposed. So thank you very much, Councillor Bonnegar. I don't see any further questions at this time, Bruce. And so with that, I'll let you go. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
And we have one other delegate. I'll just say that if you would like to speak at this meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. And next up, registered after the agenda went out the first time, is Eric Stadowski, resident of Waterloo, who has 5 or up to 10 minutes. Welcome, Eric.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, staff, and any other guests in attendance this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to address you folks tonight in regards to this application. I also appreciate the hard and diligent work put into this application, not only by the applicant, but by staff and all the other resources required to get us to this stage. There's literally thousands of pages to be read and had, and plenty of thought and consideration has been put into this application. I'm hoping to speak from a perspective of a resident who lives on Pepler Street, about 4 houses down from where this proposed development is to take place. And hopefully I can provide you with some anecdotal and observational evidence as to what I'm aware of happening at the street level, and hoping that we can all get along with the new development taking place in Uptown Waterloo. I would also like to thank Councillor of Ward 7 for sharing their concerns as many of those concerns are shared by myself as well. I'm a little concerned that while it's to be expected living in a downtown area such as this particular neighborhood, that intensification and development is to take place, I'm a little concerned that the cart might be coming before the horse in terms of addressing and realizing existing infrastructure capacity in the neighborhood, namely as it pertains to traffic and our stormwater systems. As you may be aware, this area is very close, if not situated in the floodplain, and this is a major concern. And I'm hoping to raise some issues here and concerns that may avoid an appeal down the road to this application. While I agree with much of what has been said tonight, specifically that this application conforms to the official plan in virtually all instances, I would submit to you respectfully tonight that it lacks conformity to the OP in capacity, specifically as it pertains to traffic and drainage issues of surface water and our stormwater system. I'm further concerned about the traffic impact study that was submitted and relied upon as part of the staff report. I'm concerned about the validity and the accuracy of this traffic impact study. It was conducted in 2018. It was conducted with an older site plan that had 3 separate driveways in consideration on DuPont Street, Pepler Street, and Herb Street. It was conducted with 15-minute intervals of observation and drawing conclusions in absolute values and not providing any source of error for these values that have been presented. For example, for one of the intersections observed and reported on, it was indicated that there was approximately a capacity of 1,700 vehicles per hour, or approximately 23 vehicles per minute that could pass through a particular intersection within that was conducted as part of this traffic impact study. That's a lot of vehicles. On a good day, observationally, looking out my front window during rush hour, I can see cars backed up and down Pepler Street. On adding further stresses to our infrastructure is a concern for myself and my neighbors in terms of making sure we can get out of our driveways when we need to and getting home in a reasonable manner. So there's a number of also incomplete items staff had also pointed out that need to be completed moving forward. That is also a concern. And without putting any words in the mouths of staff, I had the privilege of being able to speak with staff before making this presentation tonight, and there was a consensus on in terms of there being added stress to the existing infrastructure, and that the existing infrastructure simply might not be able to accommodate these added stresses that a development like this would put on it. And just reflecting upon a little bit about what I heard in this meeting tonight. I heard about hoping that it would not impact, for instance, the Laurel Creek Trail and achieving planned function. I'm hoping that when we are considering something like this, an application like this, and wanting to achieve planned function, that we ought not to encumber the planned function of our existing infrastructure. And one example of that would be dealing with our stormwater. Pepler Street currently floods when we have a high degree of rainfall and becomes impassable by vehicles. And with this development, we're going to be adding further to our system in terms of being able to facilitate the runoff. So I would implore council to please consider how this development is going to impact the residents, the immediate residents around the development. And if we are going to entertain, and I think we should entertain, don't get me wrong, I think we should entertain development and intensification projects such as these, but that we increase capacity at the same time. And I'm not convinced that we have the current capacity to handle a project like this. So I would ask council to consider, as part of approving the recommendations as put forth, that we consider increasing our capacity to handle increase in traffic volume, increase in our stormwater system capacity. And I would again reiterate the fact that I believe the traffic impact study, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is flawed, and we should reconsider perhaps conducting a new traffic impact study that reflects the current site plan as proposed today. I will add that I feel like a plan for a building like this would not take issue with the matters I've raised if the whole neighborhood would be redeveloped in the same manner. And that brings me back to how I started and putting the cart before the horse. I hope we increase the capacity of our infrastructure to accommodate a building like this before approving such. And with that, I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, you completed under 8 minutes, so thank you very much for that, and thanks for being well spoken on the topic and with municipal infrastructure in mind. I'll just look to councillors to see if they have any questions to go through. And I see Ward Councillor has her hand up, and I'll just, I don't see any other questions, Councillor Bonagor, so please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Eric, I just wanted to thank you for coming tonight. I know dialing into a council meeting on a Monday night, it takes a lot of effort, and I really appreciate that you've gone to the effort of not only reading through all of the plans, but trying to make sense of them and to bring your concerns to us. So I don't have any questions specifically for you from this, but I will be following up with some questions for staff if you wanted to stay on the line listening in. But thank you. I just, as your ward councillor, I just wanted to say thanks for coming tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Eric. I don't see any further questions for you, but as Councillor Bonagor offered, certainly go on mute and stay tuned in, and you'll hear some more. Thank you very much, Eric. And I will look to turn it back to now, Councillor Bonagor, do you want to wait for a minute to find out if there's any further delegations who've called in, and then we'll move to staff?
Yes, that's a great idea. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I'll now just pause for a moment while I check with clerk staff to check on that telephone. As the Deputy Clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is concluded, and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. If anyone would like to receive further notices application, please contact the planner, Laura Dewar, at 519-747-8108. And now we'll go back to Ward Councillor Bonagor for questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just have some questions for staff following on from the issues and concerns that were raised by the delegate. First of all, I was just wondering, given the concerns about traffic that were raised and the changes to the entry and exit plans for the site, can staff give us some input on whether a new traffic study could be warranted?
Hi, Mayor Jaworski, it's Ron. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Through you, Mayor, good evening. It's Ron Wormson here. Councillor, I can let you know that we will certainly have a look at the turning movements, and this application obviously requires the lifting of an H zone provision for a number of things, so we can have a look at that and report back to council after we do some more checking on turning movements and the traffic impacts.
Okay, that would be much appreciated. Thank you, Ron. While I have you here, my next question was going to be directed in all likelihood to IPPW. This area and this neighborhood does have some flooding issues. Residents on Pepler have spoken with me previously about rainwater issues, and infrastructure across the uptown is aged and aging. So I'm just wondering, given this area is already largely paved, but is there potential that this development could exacerbate the water issues related to our infrastructure?
Right, through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bonagor. Good questions, Councillor, and of course these are things that are always front of mind when staff are reviewing intensification for projects such as this. And to answer your question, what we really have to do is be extremely cautious when we look at the design assumptions for buildings like this. And what we do is require an analysis for stormwater management to make sure that the pre and post conditions for a water balance are met. So the buildings are designed, for instance, with rooftop storage to detain water. They have on-site detention so that runoff is not increased to the municipal right of way. We look at sanitary design sheets, and our modelers double check the assumptions that the developers' engineers produce, require water analysis for both potable water pressure and fire flow. There's a lot of things that go into the review to make sure that existing conditions don't receive more pressure from a development like this. But the other part of your question is the age of the infrastructure, and certainly Pepler is an older street. It's on the list of roads that will need to be completely reconstructed at some point. It's also in a lower area, so there's actually a very big concrete storm sewers and a large diameter sanitary sewer there that we inspect regularly through our CCTV program. And we do know that there are sometimes some localized events and thunderstorms and things where there's some surcharging. So we monitor that, not only pre-development, we're always checking it, but also we would monitor post-development. If, in the opinion of staff, this development could not be achieved with the existing infrastructure that's there today, we would also require that the developer at their cost upgrade the sewers. So I think that the short answer to your question is no, we would not let this development put any more pressure on municipal services as they exist today. So hopefully that helps clarify things a bit.
It certainly does, and just potentially to help the resident who had brought this forward as well. Has that assessment on the infrastructure been done yet? Where you said that if it could not be achieved with the existing infrastructure, the developer would need to upgrade the sewers. Has that been done yet, or is that something that happens through site plan and the process that is yet to come?
Through Mayor Jaworski, that's right, Councillor Bonagor. We would look at that during the detailed design information that's submitted at the site plan review stage. So to my understanding, it has not yet been completed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ron, and thank you, staff. That's everything from me at the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bonagor. I will turn over to Councillor Bodley. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot here, I think, Ron, and maybe this is food for thought for later, or a question I have, I guess, about traffic impact studies. When we look at these traffic impact studies, it's really based on this particular development, and it's not really looking at the broader, I guess, city impacts. It's looking at what's getting generated out of this development onto the very nearby streets. And I'm thinking about two things here that are going to tie into maybe just some comments or feedback that I'm hoping you might have on this. One is the Transform WR plan that was recently approved by all 8 municipalities in the region suggests that we are going to have all of our transportation trips by 2050, if I recall correctly. And I don't think that any of these transportation studies take that sort of goal or target that we've set community-wise into account. And the second thing that I want to ask about when we look at these studies is sort of an opportunity cost, I guess, because we have density targets and population increases that are happening in our region, in our city. And it strikes me that this particular location and really in the uptown, just generally speaking, being near transit, being near active transportation corridors, is likely to generate less trips per person than, say, if we were to build this exact same building at the edge of town, where active transportation and transit is much more unlikely. And maybe we'd find that there would be far more traffic impacts if we were doing that. So I'm just wondering if maybe you could provide some context to how these traffic impact studies are done, and if I am correct that it's really looking at this particular development and the adjacent streets only.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley. Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor. It's a good one. Traditionally, I can tell you that most traffic impact analysis studies are localized, and they're very car-centric for sure. And they look at, access and turning movements, and sophisticated ones will do trip destination analysis, where we can actually find out where people are going. I haven't seen the traffic study for this particular development, and perhaps other staff could comment, but I think as we evolve, and you mentioned Transform Waterloo region, we do have to start accounting for other modes of transportation and transit, and particularly those that are AT based, so pedestrian movements, bike trips, other forms of mobility that we see happening, ride sharing, perhaps, those types of things. In this case, I would hazard a guess that we are more along the traditional lines of analysis, but that's what our transportation division staff do. They look at regional traffic counts. So in this case, they would have certainly looked at Urban Bridgeport as being major thoroughfares through the city to analyze sort of, the network capacity. We have heard from residents in other areas where there's concern about cut through traffic. So that's why we do monitoring, and sort of we're looking at slow streets, and we're looking at other opportunities for making sure that we don't promote or exacerbate any existing traffic movements through local neighborhoods. So you've given staff some food for thought there, Councillor. I hope that provides a little bit of context in this case. Again, without having seen the actual study for this particular development, I think I would sort of leave it at that for now.
No, thank you very much, Ron. I appreciate that context, and I appreciate that sort of how we look at the sort of multimodal impact of a development, and as I say, sort of that opportunity cost and the target setting and the goal setting that things like our Transportation Master Plan and Transform WR have. I think that's going to be really interesting as we move forward, and I appreciate you providing that feedback on where we're at today, though. So thanks a lot. That's it for me, Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you very much, Royce. Or thank you very much, Councillor Bodley. I don't see any further hands up, so I might look to the ward councillor. I've already closed the public meeting, and I'll turn over to the ward councillor, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So since this was first proposed, the overall height has been lowered. I find it's more consistent with surrounding zoning, and this is a superbly walkable and bikeable location, which is exactly what we need on those, to get to where we need to go under Transform WR. We also need housing, a lot of housing uptown and right across the city in varied forms. So I would like to move to approve the application. I'll read the motion so that it's on the floor. Whereas Council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders And whereas Council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that Council approve staff report IPPW 2021-070 and that Council approve zone change application Z1819 for 1955207 Ontario Inc. and 1955485 Ontario Inc. for 36 and 42 Herb Street East and 39 Dupont Street East in accordance with Section 8 of Staff Report IPPW 2021-070.
I'd be happy to second that motion, Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, both of you, for getting on the floor. I'll just see if there's any comments. I would echo Councillor Bonagor's statement that we've seen certainly drastic changes in this site, and it really seems to have come along very nicely. Thank you, Laura, for shepherding it along. And I don't see any questions or commentary from the rest of council, so I think we're ready to begin voting, beginning with Ward 7, please.
This is Councillor Bonagor, and I vote in favour.
Councillor Bodley in favour.
Councillor Veith in favour.
Councillor Freeman in favour.
Councillor Henry in favour.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Again, thank you very much, Laura, for working on this big file for such a long time, and any other members of the planning team, of Joel's team that was involved. And thank you, Ron, for weighing in at the appropriate time. With that, we move along. Speeding along to item 12, questions. Does anybody have any questions for staff that they wish to present at this time? Hearing none, I will look to members of council for any new business. I will make note of a couple of items. Last night, it was World Diabetes Day, and Lions clubs are rallying around that disease to work towards solving diabetes. And the KW Community Spirit Lions selected the Waterloo Park Bridge for a lighting ceremony, working with our great team of Wonders of Winter, and lit the bridge blue last night, and it will be maintained that way as a reminder of working towards ending diabetes or bringing more solutions to the table for sure. And that will be, I think, lit every night. And speaking of which, Wonders of Winter will come back on the last Saturday night of November, running through January 1st. And that's just an excellent opportunity. The team was telling me last night about many different changes that they've made. Again, it'll be COVID safe and won't have a big launch ceremony or anything like that, but certainly looking forward to seeing everybody that Saturday evening and beyond. And a third item is Rabbi Moshe Goldman has just signaled that the menorah will be coming back to the Uptown Square for the lighting ceremony on the eve of Hanukkah, and that will be Sunday, November 28th, 5:30 p.m. It'll be really great to see things working in a COVID-safe manner in all these events, and people can enjoy it, the menorah lighting that night, but it will be available throughout Hanukkah in the Uptown Square. It's just seeing, a great feeling, I think, for all of us to see things get back to some level of normalcy while we still wait for our children to get vaccinated and the community to be protected as well as it can be. Does anybody else have any further new business? Seeing none, I will look to somebody that we have some bylaws to enact, and we have A, B, and C for enactment of bylaws as listed. Thank you, Rook. On the screen, does anybody, thank you, sorry, Councillor Bonagor for stealing all the Uptown news, but there's so much going on here and so much enthusiasm, I think it spreads for all of us. And Can I look to Ward 2, Ward 3 to consider enacting some bylaws?
Councillor Bodley here. I will move to enact the bylaws and vote in favor.
I will second that motion and vote in favor. Councillor Veith, sorry.
Councillor Freeman votes in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. And in light of me stealing the news of Uptown, I will look to Ward 7 to take us forward on adjournment, please. A small consolation prize.
No, I was saying you did a great job. Thank you. But I do move to adjourn as much as I enjoy being here with you on a Monday. And I vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley, I will second that we adjourn and also vote in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. And just to bring us back to an earlier part of the meeting when we talked about the deliciousness coming to Uptown City Hall, I look forward to that day as well, Councillor Bonagor. And have a good night, everyone.
Good night.